So the goal, I had mentioned earlier that discussions is where kind of the excitement or the real value is. So I'm trying to plant the seed and get people asking questions. So we've written some questions, and I'm just going to go around and hand them to people, and then you guys get to ask them. So, you want to?
Sure.
So there's a big experiment.
Hi. John mentioned the term microservice in his keynote, which seems to be popular right now. Will you be taking advantage of microservices?
Sure. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the term microservice just represents this concept of breaking up an application or a solution into smaller, kind of more digestible chunks, and then they're usually loosely coupled in some way. So this has some pretty big advantages. John talked about in his keynote a lot on scalability. So when you have a very large solution or a very large product and you're starting to get more and more throughput and you need to scale, you might be scaling all one system, but you're using a lot of resources for the parts that aren't necessarily important. So by breaking it up, you can scale those parts independently. You also have a lot of benefits just in terms of smaller systems are a lot easier to reason about, both operationally as you're using them for development, and then for the people who are actually developing them as well. And so by breaking these up, you can pick the right technologies for the right components. Making a change in one component is a lot lower risk because you don't have collateral damage of affecting other portions of your application or your solution. And then they're a lot easier to test and troubleshoot, right? So easier to reason about, makes them easier to test, and determine if there's areas within a smaller subset of your solution where that's happening. So to get to the original question on whether we're leveraging microservices, we kind of have always seen the benefit of those patterns. That's the reason why originally we came out with Bridge Hub and File Hub and kind of had separate products for the separate layers or responsibilities within our solution. It allows us to scale those independently. It allows customers to extend them in much safer sandboxes and leverage a lot of those benefits. Now, microservices also have some challenges with them, right? By having more smaller components, that's also in some ways harder to reason about. If you've got a problem with something that you're trying to do, you can't go to one spot, right? It could be any of those components where you're running into issues. So really our kind of approach right now is to try and take the bits and pieces from classical microservices that work really well for our problem set and try and add some layers or add some things to minimize some of the challenges with them as well.
Question. All right, here you go.
Low-code development is another common term these days. Do you consider Kinetic to be low-code?
Sure, so I'll take that question.
Great question.
This is actually a topic.
You can keep that. These are our giveaways.
This is a topic I love to talk about, and I think I love to talk about it because really before working at Kinetic, I was working for a customer of Kinetic, and I was a business analyst, and I'd work on their solutions team, and we had these internal customers that would come to my team, and they'd say, hey, we have this problem, we need to automate this solution, and so they come to us, and one of our tools in our toolkit was Kinetic. And so, as you can imagine, as a business analyst, I spent a lot of time in requirements meetings. And in those types of meetings, our customers would say, here's the problem that we're trying to solve. And eventually, I was able to pull up Kinetic on a second screen and start building out a form and build out a workflow in the requirements meeting. And so as those meetings wrapped up, our other analysts in the room would be reviewing notes, and I'd just turn my screen around and I'd say, do you mean something like this? And I just felt super empowered, and I loved being able to show them without ever having to get a developer involved, hey, we can solve this problem. So this was 6 or 7 years ago, really before low-code development was a thing. And I could tell that Kinetic was just laser focused on the user experience, but not just the end user experience, also the developer's experience, because I think Kinetic realized if the development experience wasn't good, there would be no end user experience. The developers wouldn't want to build, and no one would want to use the tool. So anyway, so Kinetic has really been in that space for quite some time, and at this point we now have 6 or 7 different applications that are all kind of low code in and of themselves. Kinetic Request is great for building forms and front ends, and Kinetic Task is great for building workflow processes and back end type things. But one of the challenges is that it's pretty hard to talk about and hard to reason about. So as a development team, we're trying to solve that problem. When I'm on site and talking with customers, either at a sales engagement or helping out on our support team, and I'm talking with new customers that have never used Kinetic before, I usually use the word Legos to kind of describe how Kinetic works. We have this front-end Lego and a workflow Lego and an integration Lego, and that really resonates with people. But where it becomes more complicated is usually on the second meeting when we dive into the products, and I say, okay, you have to go to Bridge Hub and configure this adapter, and then you have to go into Kinetic Request, and you have to point request at Bridge Hub, and then you have to set up your webhooks, and I just completely lose people. So what we want to do as a development team is really lower the barrier of entry. That's a term that we use internally to talk about making it easier to get started. So we have these separate low-code applications. What we want to do is bring them together and make those really components of a larger platform. So that you can do things like, when you're building in a form, really quickly toggle to your workflow process all in one console. Right now, a newbie has to know to go to this separate area to work on Kinetic Task from Kinetic Request. And so we want to bring our admin consoles together and just make it feel like a one cohesive platform. And that's some of the things that we're going to be doing over the course of the next couple of months and years. And so, yeah, I would say that, yes, Kinetic is a low-code platform. I would put a little asterisk next to that just to say that we're trying to make these different components or these different applications just work better together. And that's something we're constantly going after.
Yeah, I think I would definitely consider us a low-code platform. I think that there are areas that we want to address to become a stronger, cohesive platform. Before Task, we played around with a technology called Ruby on Rails, and we did a couple small side projects with that. And what we really loved about that framework, that library, was they had this concept of convention over configuration, right? So you could pull down Rails, run something from the command line, and you have a fully working web application, and it was really easy to get in and figure out what files you had to go change to make different changes. And I think we really want to get to that part or that spot as a low-code platform where things work really easily, and then as you want to customize the behavior, as you want to extend or enhance, coming in at those points and having to reduce the amount of initial configuration. I think that's kind of part of our vision of our products as a low-code solution.
Really, like low-code, it's a difficult problem to solve because I feel like the lower code you go, it's kind of like a ludicrous song, how low can you go? But the lower the code you go, the more assumptions that you're making. So low code is basically this collection of a whole bunch of different pieces that, and there's assumptions made about how they should work. When we work with these massive companies, and it's like, I don't think any company has had the same approval process. So you can't just like drag an approval process onto your workflow form. You kind of have to dumb it down even another layer so that you can make things more configurable. So we're constantly like trying to flirt with this line of how can we make it easier with also letting it be extendable. So we're going to continue to be pushing that.
Yeah, a couple of really good concrete examples of that is, like James mentioned, having more, he talks about things as like Legos and having more starting points, right? Where you might not have an approval process that works for everyone, but that doesn't mean that you need to build your approval process from scratch to get going. We want to have more, pre-built samples, bring those in as part of the tools to try and reduce that initial set, right? Because usually, if you can get 80% of the way really easily, it's really easy to tweak and then evolve your system. It's getting to that 80% sometimes that is a little bit more time consuming. Another really good example is the development team uses the term first-class citizen. We've been using that term a lot lately, and that we want all of our service components, so like James mentioned, Bridge Hub, File Hub, to be first-class citizens of one another, to know one another. So you don't need to go configure to point them back and forth. They'll just know that they exist. And when you're in CE, doing drop-down menus, it'll be able to pull your configuration data out of Bridge Hub or out of File Hub and try and minimize some of those tasks to kind of evolve more and more towards that low code, more and more towards that lowering the barrier of entry.
All right, I got a next question here. And just to summarize what you guys said there is, Yes, it's low code. Yes, it's low code. Forwards.
Okay. So Kinetic originally focused on making other systems prettier. Is that still your focus?
Sure, so I can take that one too. So yes, it is still our focus. We've always, I think our slogan is beautiful front ends for complex back ends. So that's still what our customers are doing. But we're finding that our customers are also wanting to get into this other part, and that's really the fulfillment side of things. So not only make it easy for the requester, but also let's make it easy for the fulfiller, and John alluded to this earlier. And so for the last couple of years, we've been working on making things easy for the fulfiller. And one of the ways that we do that is by making fulfillment optimized for the task at hand. So some of our, I would say, competitors or other ticketing systems or back-end fulfillment systems, they'll typically have this one big form with, I don't know, 700 fields and 14 tabs, and it's very generic, and it's used for accomplishing all different types of tasks, whether it's like a facilities thing or an IT thing. And so we take a little bit of a different approach to that, and we try to say, if we want to make this request form on the front end much easier for the requester, let's also make it easier for the fulfiller too. Let's just give them the information they need to complete the task at hand, and only ask for the inputs that are needed to move to the next step in the process. And so that's a bit of a different approach than some others have taken, and it just makes it so things are much more agile. You can make one process much better without affecting other things. So if you think back to that, complicated incident form or ticketing form, when you make a change, you're going to have to regression test for all the other use cases that form's used for. So that's a little bit of a different approach. So we've always concentrated on the requester. We're starting to concentrate on the fulfiller, and we're also going to be moving into concentrating on the managers within an organization. So now that we have some fulfillment taking place in Kinetic, our customers want to know, well, how many tickets have been fulfilled, and how long did it take, and how many requests have come in. So we're going to be moving on to work a little bit more on getting some better metrics within the tool, some real-time dashboarding capabilities. And as you guys know, we've concentrated on the developers from day one and trying to make that much easier. So yeah, we're still trying to front-end systems, but we also feel that we can be a system of record as well, and not only a system of engagement.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll go with the next question. This one's a real easy one, and I'll just ask it. Since the platform is no longer on Remedy, can it still interact with Remedy?
Yes, it can still interact with Remedy. So for those of you that don't know, I guess John explained it a little bit earlier. So we were originally built to front end this system called Remedy. It's a ticketing system. And it didn't really have a way for end users to interact with that system. They always had to call up the help desk, and the help desk would enter the ticket. So we put this front end on that. And we've evolved since then to interact with not only Remedy, but other systems. So we've separated, and we're now our own platform. But we use the same integration strategies that we did back then. We're an open platform, so we want, on the front end, for you to be able to pull data from external systems. We do that via a technology called bridging. And then on the back end, we use task handlers in our workflow process to be able to do that. So we really are, I would say, an open platform, and we will integrate with Remedy just as much as we used to, and also other things. I don't know, is there anything you want to?
Yeah, I think the answer to these two questions, there's a lot of overlap there. I think that early on, our primary focus maybe even was the making beautiful front ends for complex back ends. I think that we've evolved to wanting a platform that I used to describe Kinetic Task as enterprise glue, right? We want a system that'll fill in the gaps, right? We're trying to design the system that we want to use, that we want to build in, and I think that the beautiful front ends is a component of that, right? It's a major priority to us. But we're also looking to grow into, you mentioned system of record. One of the things that we'll be talking about with the new 2.1 release is a feature called Data Store in CE. And that is trying to give customers more of an opportunity to build systems of record in or on the Kinetic platform. So we have a lot of really great strategies for system of engagement and our traditional submissions being kind of time-based. And Data Store will provide kind of the same functionality for referential data and really, really large data sets. We want customers to be able to store millions, if not billions, of records and be able to interact with them and kind of perform in meaningful ways. And all those things, keeping with that enterprise glue kind of concept. That's one of the things that I've always really enjoyed about kind of the Kinetic philosophies is, John talks about API first. That's a great development pattern for us. It also means that anything that our product can do, customers can do or extend. Right? It makes it really easy to write utility programs. It makes it really easy to fit it into whatever workflow that you need with your business. And yeah, we don't want to ever force our customers to try and put a square peg in a round hole, right? If our system is great for a particular problem you're doing, great. If you already have a solution for it and you want workflow, great. Use Kinetic Task or our tasking component. If you want some more front ends to your stuff, we can do that. If you need a system of record because you don't have another system capable of doing that, we want to be able to do that too. We want to kind of fill in those holes and allow you to make the best decisions possible for the solutions that you're building.
Okay, so that was supposed to be a softball question, so I'm going to have to give you an even more softball question.
I heard you name your dev sprints after bands. Which band was the best sprint, and what features did it have?
That sounds pretty easy.
So I've got one, but it's a little embarrassing. So we do name our sprints after bands. Sometimes, that week I'll go on YouTube and I'll try and look for some music by that band, just kind of get in the mood. And Alanis Morissette was a sprint not too long ago, and that was where we had our first feature complete prototype of Data Store. And so that's probably my favorite sprint. And it was really fun to leave work on Friday and just be rocking out in my car. It's like rain.
I would say mine is, well, it was during the Super Bowl, and ours was obviously that week then, Justin Timberlake. And it was it was kind of a fun sprint for me because I got to see a whole bunch of different things come together. So John showed some screenshots of KinOps. That's made up of a whole bunch of different caps and bundles, and we brought them all together into this very beautiful front end, I guess I would say, and it made all of the styling consistent. And it was really the first time I would say, feeling like KinOps is just it's absolutely ready to go. So that was a couple of weeks ago, and that was a fun sprint.
What part of Kinetic was the hardest part to build?
For me specifically, probably searching, both searching of our traditional submissions and data source submissions, which are slightly different. And we'll learn more about that probably at training. Well, searching in general is just a hard problem, right, in any system. To get optimal performance, usually you need to understand the types of queries that you're making, right? Creating lots and lots of records isn't that hard, but being able to get to the specific ones in a performant way gets really difficult. And the traditional way of doing that, right, is you set up your data so that it's stored in the system or on disk in an order and in a way that's easy to retrieve out. With Kinetic Request, we don't know how you're going to use it, right? We can't create optimal search paths because we allow you to build forms as configuration, not customization, right? The definition of a form is data. It's not building new tables on the back end. It's not doing anything like that. So that creates a lot of challenges because we don't know if your form has 1 record or 1 billion records, and we don't know if you want to search by this field or and whatnot. And fundamentally with searching, you have to accept kind of one of a few realities, right? It's either going to work very well with a low number of records, it's going to be slow, or you need to know how it is that you're querying it. And trying to solve those problems in a way that provides consistent performance at any scale was probably some of the harder challenges that we had with Request for me.
And if I'll just add a little bit to it. So our experience prior to our new Kinetic Request CE environment was on top of the Remedy system, which happens to be on top of a SQL system. And when you develop in that world, usually things are pretty snappy. And then you start using the system, and you start having hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands, if not a million rows, and you start running into performance problems. And a performance problem in production is a real bummer. And unfortunately, you don't find that until you've got a lot of records. And that's kind of the history of the Remedy world or SQL world in general. When we re-architected the Kinetic request application on top of a new database system called NoSQL, and we use Cassandra, this is a completely different way of thinking. And all performance problems with the data is found at developer time, quite frankly, in our offices. The way that you interact with the Cassandra system is you have to use indexes, you have to have efficient searches, or it will just fail at development time. So we run into all the, I'll call them production performance problems in the development world. And that is I'll call it game changer for fun phrase, but that's like really a big deal. It's when systems are successful and they start getting tons and tons of records and then they start really performing poorly, that's the worst time. So we run into performance problems at development time, and it's a completely different way of thinking about databases, and I think that's what's going to be happening for lots of systems for the next 5-10 years, is moving problems to development time, not to production time. So that's what we really focused on, and that whole searching design was extremely difficult. It's extreme calculus for databases. So there's a follow-up question to what was the hardest.
So kind of going along with that, were there any pieces of Kinetic that were easier to develop than expected?
No.
Yeah, that just is a one-word answer, no. Kind of like the Remedy question. Does it work with Remedy? Yes. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, we'll do one last question. Let's see, we'll go over here. We met last night, I'm John. Here's a microphone. Here's a question for you.
I've heard a lot of talk about KNOPS as your hosted offering. Is the architecture designed for hosted or on-prem?
Yeah, so our architecture is really designed to run anywhere. So the Kinetic Platform is traditionally, for our large customers, run on-prem, so it was designed to run there, but what KNOPS did is basically made it so that we had to become a customer. So because we have to have a system that's up all the time, very reliable, we're able to make improvements to it much faster. So it's designed to run in the cloud or on-prem. It really doesn't matter. It's just designed to be the best platform in any use case.
So I do have a couple more questions. Do you want me to ask them that, or? Okay. All right. So here, what are the main architecture questions you account for when developing the Kinetic products? This is like an 8-hour discussion. Can you?
Yeah, if anyone really wants to geek out over drinks tonight, come hook me up or come chat. I mean, John hits on, to me, one of the most important ones, and that's scaling, right? And that's both scaling up and down. You want a system that is performant, that doesn't cost your small use cases a huge amount of money. And so that architecting our things in a way that handles scaling. A lot of those solutions also help with continuous availability, which I've got a lightning talk on later. And that's basically just the pursuit of 100% uptime. Right? When you have systems that scale well, that usually means that you can take pieces up and down as you're making changes and still maintain that component being available for use. Operational simplification is a term I've been kind of playing around with a little bit, which is it's a bend term. Yeah. If there's big words, it's usually me using them. And all that really means is kind of what we were hinting at earlier, where we want to lower the barrier of entry. And I really strongly believe that the majority of time and effort is in the management, right? It's after things go live. It's the full life cycle of making changes, of evolving. And we want to make that as easy as possible within our platforms. And then our open framework, right, which is that's API everywhere. That's adding really well-defined known hooks so that you can easily push data into our system, pull data out. We can send data out of our system on different events. You can set up scripts with APIs. We kind of want all of those things to be as easy as possible to kind of fit in with that concept of, don't rip and replace, don't put a square peg round hole. If you want to fit it in different areas, that kind of open platform, to me, it just really resonates. The ability to write your own, bridge adapters, your own handlers to do the things that you need to do within your specific problem domain is, I think, really awesome. I could probably go on, but
Yeah.
those are the big ones.
So I'm not sure what word you use there, but I'm always sort of pushing for defining things in 5 words or less. And Ben then responds with these words that are 8 syllables or more. So yeah, he's always making up something new. Okay, I'm going to do one last question. This is purposefully to this person because you'll see, well, for anybody that knows Kinetic, it's a reporting question.
Reporting hasn't been talked about yet. How should I approach reporting in Kinetic?
Sure. So this is actually this is a question that we get a lot. Kind of like we were talking about with searching, we really wanted to optimize our application for user experience, for optimal performance on your day-to-day interactions with the system. And that's oftentimes in conflict with how you need your data stored or how you want to interact with it from a reporting scenario. And so really, it's kind of a fundamental truth that likely you need to store your data in different ways or make it available in different ways. We actually have another lightning talk on this that Austin's going to talk about one strategy that we've been using with KinOps, and that's using our kind of open platform to every time that there's a submission, create, update, delete, fires a task process that has a handler that synchronizes that submission record in a traditional SQL database with tables that match with your forms. And that's got a lot of really big benefits to it because it's external. Your performance isn't going to impact your day-to-day usage. It can be kind of transformed into a format that your customers are familiar with. But just like with microservices, if we try and put it all in the same spot, you end up kind of having to deal with this kind of problem of the least common denominator and end up with like a data format and a data API that no one is happy with. It's not good enough for the reporting, and it's not fast enough for the day-to-day. So right now our approach is to do a little bit more with an enterprise that's ETL, extract, transform, load, to make that available in a way it's a little bit more useful for your report technicians. That's kind of our answer right now. We've been talking a lot on, particularly around analytics more than reporting, on being able to provide better dashboards built into the tool on some of the metrics where maybe we can keep a stream or use some of the kind of more modern technologies with MapReduce to be able to build up some report-like information live with a system.
Yeah, there's really, I think, 2 different types of reporting. There's this managerial reporting where there's scheduled reports that go out and they're big Excel or CSV files that people crunch data on and make pivot tables and stuff like that. And then there's this dashboarding type reporting. And so I think that's an area we're probably going to concentrate on and try to put some new features into the platform to be able to dashboard much faster and make data that's like actually show data on a screen that's live and that's accurate, that you can kind of drill down into. And then as far as the managerial type reports, we have a solution, like Ben said, where we can write that out to a reporting database, and then you can kind of have at it and make your own reports that way.
Yeah, it's another great topic. If anybody wants to catch up with one of us afterwards, love to talk more about it.